Hello, I'm Jenya DeLima. Welcome to Writing and Editing, the author-focused podcast that takes a whole person approach to everything related to both writing and editing. Writing a story with dual timelines requires knowing how to give each of the timelines equal weight and creating two engaging main characters. Author Sarah Landenwich is here to share how she created connection between two women who were born generations apart and how she wove their stories together. Well, thank you for being here today.
Thank you for having me. I'm so delighted to be here.
Can you tell us first about the two different points of view in your novel?
Sure. So, my novel, The Fire Concerto, is about a brilliant female musician lost to history and another woman's quest to ensure she is not forgotten. So, two very different timelines, one happening in 1997 in Austin, Texas, one happening in the 1870s, early 1880s in Warsaw, Poland.
So, how did you choose each of these locations and then also the years that they both lived in?
So that is actually a very long answer, but essentially, the specific years were chosen because of the way that the intervening time periods between the first woman in the 1870s and the contemporary woman in the 1990s, all the events that had to happen in between, essentially, I needed a time and place for the center object of my novel, which is a metronome, to disappear. And if you are looking for a place for a valuable object to vanish in history, that time and place is Poland after the Nazi invasion of September 1st, 1939. So I knew I needed
Mhm.
this moment in time, but in order for the character at that moment to have this metronome, they couldn't be too far apart. I couldn't set my protagonist in our current day because the people who would have been around in World War II would have been dead.
Right. What organizational tools did you use to keep track of all of this, such as that timeline and keeping track of the events that had to separate the two of them but still bring them together?
An actual timeline, like I wrote out an actual one on a piece of paper. I tried to do it on a computer, but I really needed that long visual thing that, we used to do in elementary school
Yes.
in order to keep track of each date, each woman's part. And it did require several times for me to go back and adjust the dates, which was very complicated. And I
Mhm.
remember, like being very frustrated each time that had to happen. But as many writers know, a lot of times you have to adjust for reality, right? You can write
Right.
your first draft, and then as you are getting further into the historical record, you realize, oh, well, this event happened, 2 or 3 years earlier, and I am going to have to therefore adjust everything around it. So it took a while to really choose these exact years in the past.
Mhm.
And the modern day 1997, I knew it was going to be late 90s. I just picked 1997 randomly.
Right. And did you do all this timeline work before you started writing, or did you start writing first?
I started writing first. So I always write a first draft without having done a ton of historical research.
Mhm.
So I write past present narratives. So I'm always writing in some way in the past. But I rely when I do the first draft on my general knowledge of that time period because I'm not normally writing about a time I have no idea of, right? Like I'm not writing about 6th century BC, which is a time that's totally unfamiliar to me. I'm always writing in the 19th century. So I have a general grasp of the important events of that time, the general culture of that time. And I like to write that first draft before doing a deep dive into the research because I feel that in the first draft, the primary job is to let the imagination tell a great story.
Mhm.
And once you start digging into the research, you feel very beholden to the research, to historical accuracy, which is extremely important. But for me, I do that after the first draft because I like to get out what I feel like is the best story I can get. And then I go back and I say, okay, well, these few plot points couldn't happen. Historically, they're inaccurate. So I'm going to have to change those.
Mhm.
And while that may, create some inefficiency, to me, it's worth it to get that initial output without any of the critics or voices intervening.
Yes. I've heard that from other people too, where they might get stuck on something like what kind of shoes would they have worn in the 1790s, and then they just don't advance the story because now they're consumed by answering this question. And then that
Yes.
motivation or even the ideas that had popped up, now they're gone.
Yes. Yeah, it can get in the way. It's similar to, if you share your work too early. To me, it's the same thing. Like looking into the nitty-gritty of the historical record too early is the same as showing your work too early to a reader. It's going to start getting in your head.
Hmm. So, how did you ensure that each character had her own unique voice?
I do a lot of character work also after the first draft, where I'm looking at trying to develop what is the motivation? What are the values of these people? What do they care about most? And to me, that helps know who they are.
Mm.
But specifically for this novel, for voice, I was looking around for the voice of this time. And I like to read a lot of work, written in the 19th century.
Hmm.
So for instance, I love Jane Austen, but she's too early for the book that I wrote, right? Her books were published in the early part of the 19th century. So the voice and the language and the word choice isn't going to be quite right. So I was looking around for a voice for this exact period, the 1870s, and I found online actually a wonderful archive of letters among the Bronte siblings.
Oh, yes.
So I spent an afternoon reading them, and it just gave me this really lovely sense of the language, the style, the syntax, of that particular moment.
Yes.
And from there, I felt like I had all I needed to develop the voice of my 19th century character, who in this book is heard mostly via her letters.
Ah, okay. That's
So
even
it was a
more fitting
perfect
then.
proxy.
Yes.
Yes.
And then did you do that for your character in 97 also? Since
No,
obviously that would not be the same as how we talk even now.
that's true. It's not. But no, I felt like I could hear her
Mm.
voice. I felt very, not on the first draft, of course, but after doing more character work and, getting to know her better, I felt like I could hear her talk.
Ah. Well, was there one timeline or character who felt easier to write than the other?
Yeah, I think it was that 19th century character who was easier to write for
Oh,
me.
interesting.
I know, isn't it? I don't know exactly why, but I
Oh
think
no, that
that
was my next question.
I know. I think that it's because of that immersion that you can do
Mhm.
into the historical record. Reading those letters from the Brontes, reading other work written around that time. It made me feel like I could sink into a world. Whereas the 1997 plot line, I was really creating bit by bit, block by block. And so I couldn't dip into it in the same way.
Mhm. Did you also
Sometimes,
visit historic places, or had you in the past and that helped you with that also?
no. So I love this question because it exposes me as the fraudulent writer that I am. I,
We can
so
cut it.
no, it's okay. I feel fine about it. Um, This novel is set partially in Warsaw, a place I have never gone. And
Oh,
while I was writing it, I kept being like, man, I've got to get myself to Warsaw. But then I realized that the Warsaw of 1997
yes.
is no more present for me
Hmm.
than the Warsaw of 1881. It's gone, right? I
Right.
cannot go there. And so instead, what I did was I interviewed people who had lived there during that time. And I also crucially got travel guides,
Oh,
both for Warsaw from 1997 and Warsaw from 1881
oh,
or
that's
late
clever.
19th century. And that really helped so much
Hmm.
be able to, build the world. Do you remember the eyewitness travel guides?
Yes.
So they, like for listeners who are maybe too young to remember that, these were well, when you used to travel to another country, you would go to the bookstore and you would get an updated travel guide for that city.
Mhm.
And this was a huge business back,
Oh, yeah.
before smartphones, because if you were going to travel abroad, you didn't have your phone. Like you had to have something to help you navigate the city and figure out how to say hello, like where's the doctor. And I found one of these eyewitness guides, which were unique in that they were all done in pictures. So each page is full of hundreds of pictures of buildings, of monuments, city landmarks, that kind of thing.
Hmm.
And I used those travel guides from the late 90s and basically built the city of Warsaw in my head and was able thereafter to create what I feel like is a pretty realistic version. And I did have someone review it who was like, "Yeah, this passes for me, and I lived there."
That's high praise.
Yeah, I feel pretty good about it.
Yeah.
So I hope that I go to Warsaw someday, but I did not go to write this book.
Well, moving back to the stories that are here, did they influence one another as you were writing them?
Yes. So the women in this book have overlapping themes of a physical injury that dictates their ability to play music.
Uh,
So both of them have a career ending injury, and it causes a dramatic turn in their lives. Both of them have been on this trajectory to be famous performers, and the injury just ended that in one moment. And so, in many ways, this is a book about how people move forward when a dream or something you've been working for your whole life is no longer available. But as I was writing them, I found that I wanted their struggle to be parallel, of course, but not exactly the same
right.
because they are two different stories and two different times. And obviously, the cultural environment in which both of them were living is going to also impact a recovery or expectation from
Oh, yes.
what you can do. I was trying to like have them echo each other emotionally
Oh,
without having their paths be the same.
oh, interesting. Yeah, I can see how that would work. And I can think of examples too where I've seen this in other stories because that helps give it that feel of everything fitting together, even though they're obviously very different people and living in very different times.
Yes. In the book, the modern day character is finding both support and a certain level of discomfort in knowing
Oh,
about the past woman's track, because in the historic part of the book, that woman ends up killing somebody and going to an asylum. I mean, her path is very bad.
right. Yes. No,
um
that's at a minimum.
right. Yes. Yeah. So, my contemporary character is disturbed by this, but also has great empathy
Mhm.
because she understands how having a dream essentially taken from you
Yeah,
can place you on a course for a very bad outcome.
right. So how did you switch between the two timelines? Was it alternating chapters, something else?
It was something else. So I quickly realized I tried to do alternating chapters
Hmm.
or kind of chunk it, in parts. But I quickly realized that partly because of who I am as a writer, partly because this is a kind of complex and intricate plot, that I would have a 200,000 word book,
Uh,
which is unpublishable, right? And so I was looking around for a structure that I could use that would serve both timelines without causing this giant book.
mhm.
And I found that model in one of my favorite books, which is Possession by A.S.
Oh,
Byatt.
yes.
I love this novel. I think it is so masterfully put
Mhm.
together. Also, it satisfies all of my nerdy interests as an English major. So it's perfect. And I've read that novel many times and enjoyed it. So I was familiar with it. And I was kind of looking around and I thought, okay, how does she put this book together? This is most definitely a past present narrative, but it is not a straight dual timeline by any stretch of the imagination.
Mhm.
And in that novel, most of what happens is the predominant storyline is the present. However, the reader feels very much that they are familiar with the past story
Oh,
because the contemporary characters are constantly talking about investigating it, and they're
yes.
also dealing with primary source materials. They're looking at letters, they're looking at journals. And I thought, okay, this is what I'm going to do as
Mhm.
well. Because if you study possession, it's so fascinating that she came up with that structure because truly there's only one chapter in that book that actually takes place in the past. Like only one.
See, I read it and
But
I don't think I even realized that. But yeah,
I
it's
know.
exactly like
Yeah.
you're saying. Yeah.
Yeah.
You
You
don't
don't even
have to
notice.
follow that typical dual timeline structure to make readers feel equally invested in both halves.
You do not. So I decided to do the same and take my lead from that book. So I did a similar thing where a lot of the past story is revealed through letters. And in my case, it is academic texts about, this murder that happened in
Oh,
the
yeah.
past and differing opinions, like one from a feminist scholar and one from this more like traditional male
Right.
scholar that are telling the story, the historical story, which is fictional, through their particular lens.
Mm-hmm.
And so by the time my readers actually meet my character from the past herself, it's very late in the book. And they have had all these different versions of who she is. And then they get to see for themselves who she is and what really happened on this fateful, murderous night.
Oh my gosh, I can see that really contributing to the tension in the book too, especially as the reader is trying to parse out for themselves, okay, so which viewpoint is more accurate, or should I believe this person because of their perspective on this? Or is this person more informed because they understand what it was like to be a woman back then and the limited choices she had? Yeah, so what an interesting concept.
Yeah, it was really fun to play with that.
Hmm. Well, what was the biggest challenge then that came with writing the two timelines?
Definitely in shrinking it down to a word limit that would be acceptable for literary fiction, which is they normally say 110 is kind of the
Yeah.
upper limit, but they usually want it around 100.
Hmm.
So for me, probably like the first typed out, polished draft of this was 112 or something. It's too long. And continually trying to winnow this very large plot with a lot of material
Hmm.
down in a way that could be closer to 100,000 words while keeping all the parts of the plot. That was a big challenge. It required, at a certain point, some rewriting of the plot in order to take out a step,
Yeah,
which,
so
of course, once you change one plot line,
right, exactly, because they're all entangled together, otherwise the subplots wouldn't work anyway.
yes. So that was a giant headache. But in the end, I got it down to, I think, I can't remember what exactly it is, 103 maybe. I mean, it's right
Mhm.
where it needed to be.
Yeah, so what exactly did your revision process look like, but also making sure you were balancing both stories as you were revising?
My revision process was so many different processings, honestly.
That sounds right.
Yeah, I mean, there's so many. I don't even know if I can remember at this point. But one thing that I did, and I learned this, I think when I was writing the novel I wrote before this, which is unpublished. So, like many writers, my first novel never got published, but it had multiple points of view
Hmm.
and it was also very large. One thing that I did when I wrote that first book was I would pull out every character and I would do a revision of their whole plot
Ah,
and then put it back in the larger, Word document and then pull out the next one. And that I found to be a much more manageable way of revising than, trying to sit down with 100, however many thousand words, and figure
Right.
out where to start. And I use that for this book too, even though it didn't work in quite the same way. But I would select, which themes am I going to focus on in this particular revision, or which plot line, which
Mhm.
character am I working on now? So it's kind of waves or threads of
Okay.
revision.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I would start with the hardest one, the one that I knew would cause the most ripple effect.
Yes.
And then get that one set in a way that I was satisfied with, and then move on from there.
Mhm.
And I really like that way of revising because it makes it feel like it's steps instead of this
Right.
giant
Yes.
unending project that feels impossible.
Oh, for sure.
Because, in a few days or a week, you could do one thread of a whole book.
Yeah. So, what do you think the story would have lost if it had been told only from a single perspective, such as the modern day character only looking back at these materials and never meeting the character from the past, well, the more distant past on your own?
Oh, I think it would have lost almost all of its pizzazz, honestly, because to me, the essence of this story was someone in the present uncovering a mystery of the past, not only to quote unquote write history, but
Right.
also to unlock her own path
Mm-hmm.
forward from her own career ending injury. And her journey emotionally, like her hero's journey, is found through uncovering the deeper truth about someone else's. So they are really interlinked in that way.
Well, and then finally, what advice would you give to authors who'd like to write using this type of story or this type of structure?
So I'm currently underway on a new dual timeline novel that is more of a straight dual timeline. So this is, interesting for me to look at it from a different perspective now.
Oh, yeah.
I feel that the best advice is, how is the story going to unfold in the most interesting way for your reader?
Mm,
And to me, that's probably not something that you're going to know on the first draft. It's probably something you know after you write the first draft, because you're trying to figure out the way that the reading experience is the most satisfying.
yep.
And sometimes the reader needs to know all the information in more or less real time. But sometimes it's more fun to have them solve the puzzle. So
Mhm.
it really depends on the plot, like everything in a novel, right? It all
Yes.
depends on the plot.
I know that's one of the fun things about writing. There's never a quick yes or no, this or that answer. It almost always comes down to, well, it depends.
It depends. It just depends. But I do think that because stories, past present narratives are big, unwieldy, and you have to do all the things you would do for one novel twice or
Mhm.
more, depending on how many timelines you have. I do think that it is good to try to find a model of a book that does it in a way that you like.
Oh, yeah.
So for me, finding possession was essential. But I also looked at so many different past present
Right.
narratives and thought, how is each one of these working?
Hmm.
Because, someone's already done this before, right? You don't have to figure it all out.
Hmm.
If you can find a general structure that you think works, then you're good to go.
All right. I think that's great advice. And I think that advice applies to any genre you're writing in, really. So thank you.
You're welcome.
And thank you for listening. And be sure to check out the show notes for additional information, including all of Sarah's links. And if you enjoyed today's episode, I'd appreciate if you could rate or review this podcast on Spotify or Apple. Thanks again.